hello, hello, hello. Hello, 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 hello.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Pinoy Sci-Fi
Morning.
Con Podcast 2024. Well, we're doing this for the very first time, Sunday morning, 9 o'clock, time check. And we've invited several sci-fi authors, not only by eight authors, but also by other publishing houses. And I am very excited to present them all to you. Of course, this podcast is also to promote the upcoming Pinoy Sci-Fi Con, which is happening on March 16, Saturday, 3 p.m. at Fully Book High Street. So this is going to be the very first sci-fi mini convention that we're doing, and we're all very excited. We'll have not just the featured writers that we have today for the podcast, we'll also have um, Joel Salud, and we'll have Renato Tranquilino, Doc Vince, Cam Illustrisimo, Katrina Olan, Rommel Carrera, to name a few. And well, anyway, without further ado, I would like to introduce to you guys the writers that will be featuring in this podcast. And by the way, don't worry if you miss this entire episode. We are going to present this episodes as well to Spotify. So you'll be able to listen to this. Well, it'll probably be broken down to mini episodes, but it'll be available on Spotify. Okay, so all right. Without further ado, I would like to actually. They're all here backstage. I can turn on your camera, guys. Yeah. Hi, hi. So we've got Katrina Olan, Romel Carrera, Doc Vince, Renato's missing, Cam Illustrisimo. We'll also have Rain Rillera in a bit. She'll be joining us. So we have several questions that we prepared for you para lang to also educate um those who won't be able to come at the upcoming Pinoy Sci-Fi Con kasi parang ano to yan, it's gonna be like a glimpse, right, of what's going to happen. Okay, so I think I'll be focusing first on Cam and also on Renato's books. Okay, so actually, I only have two sci-fi books in my library right now dito sa Hong Kong. So I've got the, of course, Fate of a Distant Future. Unfortunately, I don't have Cam yet, but I also want to special mention Pure Human by Daniel Invic. Yeah, so these are amazing Pinoy sci-fi books that you should add on your cart. So, well, guys, Renato and Cam, I just want to special mention then na Renato bought the sci-fi idea to us several years back during the pandemic. And he came up to me and asked me, okay, why not we do this Pinoy sci-fi well, basically book collection. So we started really with Fate of a Distant Future, which is a collection of short stories. And if I'm not mistaken, Cam also recently launched your book, Second Gen Synthetics, right? Which is also a collection of short stories. Can you guys, before we dive into like the short story stuff, can you maybe Cam, let's start with Cam first. Can you tell the audience what Second Gen Synthetics is all about?
Okay, so Second Gen Synthetics is a short story collection that's set in the future. So Neo Manila of 2087, and it revolves around five synthetics. We call them synthetics. They are discriminated against by naturals or ordinary humans in this futuristic world. And these synthetics, five of them, so we have an artist, a violinist, and a writer, to name a few different kinds of artists. They are all sharing the same goal of like proving their humanity and fighting for their rights in this hostile environment. So that's what the book revolves around. Like, how do these people who are constantly dehumanized trying to get their art out? So it's mostly focused on like synthetic art. It's an android narrative that's focused primarily on android artists, and I hope you get to enjoy it.
And it's set in the Philippines, right?
Yeah, it's set in the Philippines.
Yes. So that's year 2087. Renato, how about Fate of a Distant Future? Can you tell us more about the short stories that are in the book? And also, what year is it? Is it set in the Philippines as well?
Yeah, everything about like Fate of a Distant Future is set in the Philippines with ties to other countries. So it's written in a way you would watch Black Mirror, if anyone here is familiar with the series Black Mirror in Netflix. And it's four stories loosely connected to each other, and it talks about how the Philippines ended up becoming a planet colonizing country with lots of trials and tribulation in between, of course. And so it's like that in a
Mm-hmm.
nutshell.
Mm-hmm. Right. I would want to talk about these are also standalone short stories, right? So they can be read as an individual story. But then
Correct.
if you look at it as a whole, the setting is the same and basically they're all in the same universe and might as well maybe in one of the stories they can meet up. Parang ganon yung effect,
It's
right?
yeah,
So,
they're kind of loosely connected. So at the end of each story, there's a little clip. I mean, you can easily forget about the little clip of information, but then when you go to the next story, you'll realize, oh yeah, they're kind of like a continuation, that sort of thing. So that's how it's kind of set up. So
mm-mm, mm-mm. Right. So, I just have a follow-up questions there. Follow-up question. Um, Later on, you also published um Hong Kong Connection. Actually, this will be launched at the Pinoy Sci-Fi Con. And then there's also like Look to the South, and they're all supporting these anthology
okay.
then,
Yeah,
isn't
I
it?
wasn't gonna go into it like right now because okay. So basically,
Mm,
how it works is you have the four core stories in Fate of a Distant Future, and so then what I wanted to do was kind of like do a manga type effect where I would then write these other little stories, which are I call them book companions that talk about certain events. Uh, about a particular story in the main in the that is in the four um, main stories. So it's like as you read the main book, there are other backstories that's happening to those four main stories. Okay, so
mm,
that's why you've got Look to the South and then Hong Kong Connection. So those books will later on connect to a bigger trilogy that's being developed. But anyway, for now, it's like that's how Fate of a Distant Future is set up.
mm-mm. Right. You mentioned yung supplementary kind of materials
Book companions.
for
Yep.
Fate of a Distant, yeah, book companions. Cam, this question is for you because you're from the educational sector basically, and you teach literature. Do you think sci-fi has a space on, well, in schools in the future?
Well, certainly. Number one, from what I've noticed, when I assign Philippine science fiction to students, their first reaction would many of their first reactions are somewhere along the lines of, "May ganito pala sa Pilipinas," which is quite alarming because we have so many science fiction stories out there that are not as appreciated as they should be. And as much as possible, I try to incorporate many speculative fiction as well as realistic fiction stories in my syllabus. And I certainly believe that, yes, we need more spec fic in our syllabus because when people think of sci fi, they normally think of Star Wars. They don't tend to think of local fiction works. It's quite alarming how people are. It's alarming. It's how people are surprised that there are Philippine sci-fi works out there. Although that's slowly starting to change. Like I see more and more. I mean, when I assign my students to write short stories, there are kids who would submit like futuristic no limitang heroes, and that's wonderful. And it's nice to see that alongside other speculative fiction genres like horror and fantasy. And it's a genre that we can learn a lot from. So it's just like realism in that sense. I wouldn't pit these two forms of literature against each other because they both serve their own purpose. They're both equally powerful, but we really have to appreciate speculative fiction even more. And I think teachers should incorporate more local, as in Filipino writers who write speculative fiction in their syllabi more often.
Do we have well, do we already have books pa that are not indie published in the Philippines na sci-fi? Oh,
The closest I can think of would be the short story by Gregorio Brillantes, I think, titled
mhm,
um what was that? A Fall Centennial. I think it was published by
mhm,
Ateneo Press in the
mhm,
70s or 80s.
mhm,
That's the closest I can think of. There are some, mostly, most of, oh wait, UPD Naman has a short story collection, I think,
mhm,
of short stories that are science fiction for young adults. I think that's what, that they have that. Uh, but other than the short story anthologies, I cannot think of a novel yet that's not published by Indie Press. If it's not Eight Letters, it's
mhm,
Avenida, Paper Cat. It's usually in the presses that
mhm,
are more open to this, although I think it's slowly
mhm.
starting to change as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So I believe we're seeing a trend here, since also like we kind of boost the genre itself. So we also nakita na rin natin. I mean, of course, there's Kat Olan, who have been doing this for quite some time now. And we'll be talking to her later. Pero like, there's like the choices of sci-fi books compared to all the other genres. I believe, um, masyado pang it's all very limited, konting-konti pa lang. And I believe it's also because, from the publisher's point of view, I would say, publishing science fiction books is actually a risk, a very big risk, because I mean, who would read sci-fi books, right? Sa Philippines, it's more romance, maybe fantasy, kasi like yung mga aswang and horror stories. But then science fiction, we need to like twist them a bit. We do find people na like they enjoy watching superheroes. I mean, I think growing up, I watch all the Japanese animes, and I think may mga telenovelas din ng mga superheroes, and I think these are counted as science fiction works as well. So, Renato, you'll be showing something to us, tama ba, in the upcoming Sci-Fi Con? Any
Yeah.
any blurb on it or ano ba?
Okay. Yeah. Firstly, like one of the reasons why Pinoy sci-fi hasn't
Mm,
really caught on is because lack of marketing.
mm,
No one really goes around talking about like Philippine sci-fi because they a lot of people would see it as a joke in the mass market sense, and so there's not much support for it. So Cindy's right, like no one would dare publish a 600 or 500 page novel on science fiction. I mean, I've seen some wonderful graphic novels of sci-fi Pinoy sci-fi based characters, even aswang type aliens, and so they are there. But does anyone know them? Not really. But Anyway, so what I'm doing at Eight Letters is actually spending the time to market the product, which is Fate of a Distant Future. to the point of been working on this other project that I'm going to be showing a tiny bit of on at the beginning of the Sci-Fi Con, and I've been doing this with another studio for since last year, October last year. Basically, it's going to be it's uh, it's an evolution of Fate of a Distant Future into somewhat a big screen. So that's all I'm gonna say, and I'm gonna let you guys like view it on the day.
Okay, that means they shouldn't miss it, and then they have to be, well, you have to
You
be
have to be
punctual,
there by
guys.
3 o'clock. It's only gonna be
3
shown
o'clock.
once. Yeah, no
Yes.
pictures, no
Uh,
videos.
No
I have
pictures,
to
no
insert.
videos.
Yeah,
I would
and it's
recommend to
going.
come earlier because may
Yeah,
registration pa.
yeah.
Mm-mm.
I think it would, but unfortunately, I mean, even though I'm one of the executive producers, I have to protect like my studio and my studio's reputation. So what you're gonna be seeing is actually only a quarter of what we actually did,
Mm.
just to show you how serious we are with this. So far, it's cost us about close to 250,000 pesos. So
My goodness. That's the cost. But I've
if you
seen
wanna
it
push,
and it's
yeah,
amazing. Yeah.
if you want to push Pinoy sci-fi, you gotta go all the way. I mean, as long as I have money, I
Mm.
can assure you, it's gonna go into this. This is gonna be part of my legacy to the country, and everyone's pretty excited. It's kind of hush hush at the moment, so anything that I
Mm.
do that I can show will always be shown at Pinoy Sci-Fi Con first. Okay, so
Yes.
that's a promise. So there
Yes,
you go.
thank you so much for supporting Pinoy Sci-Fi Con. Cam, you'll also be talking, we'll discussing a topic on sci-fi. Can you give us a glimpse, what you're going to talk about?
Well, I thought of this topic because my short story collection, Second Synthetics, is very character driven. I usually write with the characters created first, and then the world building revolves around the characters. That's how I normally write my stories. I feed the world gets built around these characters, and then the more you learn about the world, the more fleshed out the characters become. And I realized that to promote Philippine sci-fi and um to contextualize or localize science fiction is to like make the most out of like our culture and our personality traits. So I decided to focus on characterization because that gets left behind in world building more often than not. People don't normally think of characters as part of world building, but I think they are. So I'm excited to talk about that.
I totally agree. Yeah. And I would say your book is a perfect example of the characterization, when it comes to building your, well, world building in sci-fi genres. And I think, you guys, you can avail these books when, when you go this coming Saturday. Please support our sci-fi writers. Thank you so much, Cam and Ren. I'll be jumping now
Thank
onto the,
you.
thank you. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you.
Uh, I'll be now jumping to our next guest. We have Katrina Olan and of course Rommel Carrera. So Kat Olan, she's, I would say, one of the Pinay sci-fi writers, pioneering sci-fi in the Philippines. And of course we have Rommel Carrera. So this is going to be an interesting talk as well because um you both have superheroes basically in your books. Yeah, that is your common denominator. Kat, can you perhaps talk to the audience about like a short description muna, like how Tablay started, and you've been doing this like pre-pandemic. How was your journey so far?
Okay, hi. So, good morning, everyone, to everyone that's listening here in the Philippines and abroad. Well, only abroad. Okay, so dream big, guys. So my name's Katrina F. Olan. I've been working on science fiction stories since 2017. Yeah, that's when I started writing Tablay. It actually started out. I mean, even when I was young, I was looking back at my old documents and the things that I would write for grade school, and I realized I did write a lot of futuristic, not necessarily science fiction, but futuristic stories. My first science fiction book that we have in on the press is Tablay, which is a Filipino science fiction novel. It's a best-selling indie novel, and it combines mecha and Philippine mythology. So it's not quite the average superhero story, but there are characters based on super robots. So everyone's love for Voltes 5 and Gundam and Evangelion. I guess it's a love letter to these big robots. And then the second one that I published, oh, this one by the way, it got nominated in as best young adult fiction at the 2022 Filipino Readers' Choice Awards. So this was for Tablay. Ito naman si Makina,
Mm-hmm.
published it last year under Summit Book. So thank you Summit for taking a chance on me. So it was co-authored by Ian Santa Maria. I would love to show you the insides, but there are different stories. There are around 50 stories of science fiction, but it basically talks about this memoryless machine, or a machine whose data was corrupted, but the purpose of the machine was to record history. So now, to kind of bring back all the memories that the machine has lost, it has to synchronize with the human being. So parang traveler or recorder siya. So all of the memories that came from that
Mm-hmm.
synchronization are the stories here in Machina.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been a really wild ride, but I think the stars really aligned from the very first moment that I picked up my pen and I wrote my
Mm-hmm.
first science fiction story. Obviously, I didn't know that it would be this big. I just wrote the story of Tablay at first because I felt it was like an escape from my reality back then when I started writing it. Um I think also because I spent so much time in my youth trying to be like the people in the West. Like I want to make a Star Wars story, or I want to make a Marvel DC story, but then at the same time, when I entered the comics community, the local scene, you can see they're so passionate about like Filipino things. And parang in a sense napahiya ako na parang how come I can't use my talents to create something for this country, right? We're trying so hard to be like the Western world when in fact we have such a rich parang bench, or we have such a deep well of our own
Mm-hmm.
cultures and myths. Now why can't we lean into that? Kaya sinabi ko, okay, before it was even sci-fi actually, I just wanted to do something Filipino. I just wanted to
Mm-hmm.
write something about our culture. Tapos sinabi ko, okay, it's Filipino, but what makes me me? What can I do na hindi pa ginawa ng mga FIFOL, right? So sinabi ko, okay, it's sci-fi, but it's Filipino. So that's where the concept I guess
Mm-hmm.
melded together, and I was like, what is so Filipino that no one else can own it? And then I thought our mythology. So that's where the concepts of like mechanical tikbalangs, mechanical
Mm-hmm.
aswang, and the whole concept of uh, a gigantic hyper-electric magnetic bomb called Bakunawa came. So ganon, those were the
Mm-hmm.
concepts I played with. So yeah, it really paid off. Sorry, I talked a bit too much.
No, no, no. We love it. So I think it gives us an idea na, well, Kat Olan is an original. I would say there's nothing like what you've done so far. And well, I've done my research on the genre of this sci-fi, because sci-fi guys has a lot of subgenres. And mecha, if you haven't heard of that term, mecha is more on the robots and the machines. And it's good to know na you're marrying it with Philippine
Mythology.
subgenres, like the like mythology. Ayan. Ayan, wow. the engineering behind this is so special, well researched. Kat, do you have a background on engineering these stuff, or how did you go around the world building?
Yeah. Actually, so funny. I'm like a frustrated engineer. Actually, gusto ko maging when I was grade 1, I wanted to be a marine biologist kasi I thought all you do is like swim with the fish. Tapos makikita mo yung fish. But I guess I was just inspired in general by a lot of my family kasi a lot of us, we work in the sciences and we work in the arts. But I've never really been good at math. So like the closest thing to like becoming an engineer is writing science fiction, because you can have the concepts but you don't need the execution per se. But to make actually, and this will be in my talk on the 16th, that the most realistic way to build science fiction is to base your story on grounded scientific fact, because science fiction does not afford the same suspension as of disbelief as fantasy does. To make science fiction work, it has to be realistic. So even if I did even if I did not have an engineering background, I love to immerse myself in science concepts, whether that be engineering, basic mechanical engineering, coding. I had this whole parang pursuit to try to find so many resource materials that I could, to make sure that the world was realistic. Specifically for Tablay, I distanced myself from watching and reading Mecha the entire time that I was writing Tablay, because I did not want it to fall into the cycles and cliches and tropes that Mecha had. So
Mm.
instead of watching and reading Mecha as a source, I went left field, and I studied so many stories and biographies and nonfiction about World War One and Two. So by studying source material na not directly connected with Mecha, parang na-expand yung mind mo sa possibilities of the narratives, right? You get to see different concepts that are otherwise limiting by the anime manga market. So that's what I did. I studied everything from what are the specs of different warplanes, and that's why you can see it dito sa Tablay din, like everything from the manufacturers, the power plants, the cruising speed. Also in like Machina, I didn't study just science fiction, pero I kind of leaned. My favorite story actually dito sa Machina to write was parang to do a biology entry on a plasmatic manananggal. So the approach here I took na let's be unpredictable. We're going to imagine na yung POV mo is Sir David Attenborough. So I actually consulted a biologist to talk about the scientific classifications like the kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. So parang it's really looking beyond the genre to build a realistic world is my parang the bottom line or the thesis statement yan. So yeah.
Wow, that's quite but it's an in-depth dive into the world of Cat Olan and world building. And I think nabigyan tayo ng glimpse talaga kung ano yung pag-uusapan natin this coming Saturday for your talk. Romel, since you did
Hey,
mention that you're an engineer, you're an engineer yourself, and how did you basically apply your knowledge na in engineering? Have you ever applied that into Just the East, your recently launched novel?
yeah, thanks. At Cat, I think we have a lot of things to talk about. I'm a I'm a chemical engineer by education and profession. Then I went into management, but my passion really when I was growing up was chemistry. So a lot of the chemistry stuff in Justice Filipinas is really based on my knowledge. The lead character there, his name is Bratman. he's supposed to be a super genius, which is my aspiration. And he has really no superpowers, physical superpowers, other than his intellect. And he uses a lot of that. He uses a lot of chemistry. He uses a lot of things on acid-base reaction, on lubrication, viscosity, and things like that, and even using some mathematics to identify, for example, where the next target of the monsters will be. So yeah, so a little bit of that is in the book.
Yes. Thank you, Romel. So how about can you talk about, well, a little bit about the Brat Cave and all the other characters that you have then in your book?
Yeah. Okay. So you see my note there. I'm from the Brat Cave. Well, 6 months ago, I wasn't a writer. Okay. So I share that I'm an engineer, but my real hobby is music. So I'm actually in the place I call the Brat Cave, which is the man cave, and this is where I do all the music stuff. You can see here some pictures of my idol, Paul McCartney and the Wings. Okay. Um, but really, the Justice concept came from, I don't know if you can see it clearly, but it came from an album. I had an album last year. It's on Spotify. It's called Justice Filipinas, and it's a concept album where all the songs are about, I would say, dysfunctional superheroes, right? Superheroes who have powers based on typical Filipino dysfunctional traits. Like, for example, the lead character there is someone who's very naughty. He uses his knowledge of chemistry to do naughty pranks. So but he's also very, what do you call this? He's very torpe in Tagalog, right? So, and that's why it's just is. That's something that I've been working with it since high school. Just is people who are torpe, right? So I have a couple of songs featuring that character, and then I have also a song about someone who's plastic, right? So someone who's doble car or double faced. Then there's another song about a chismosa. Okay, so it was very interesting to me that there's this set of songs. So I talked to a couple of people to for potentially adopting this into potentially scripts or comics. But so some of them told me, write a concept, write the first episode. Long story short, I ended up writing the whole book itself. Okay, so so all the characters are based on the character traits in this album. So, for example, I don't have so this is the book. One of the unique things about the book is, of course, while I was writing the book itself, if I don't, okay, you can see my workstation here. It's my laptop, and then right next to a music station. So while I was writing the book, I was also thinking about some of the themes of some of the characters and some of the incidents as well. And I was writing themes, and then I developed them into full uh, musical pieces, right? So for example, in the book, you will find QR codes with links to another album that I made regarding this book. So, for example, the main theme of the book of the album is based on the Justice song. I took one of the I took one of the melodies there and then made it into an orchestral piece. So all of the key elements here, for example, something happening, somebody died, there's a theme for that. Somebody had their first kiss, there's a theme for that as well. There's a theme for a manananggal, roughly based on the Terminator theme. There's another theme for this is a Burbalang. This is an aswang from Mindanao. There's a theme for that, and there's a theme also for the Tikbalang. Okay, so there.
Mhm. Wow. Thank you, Romel. So parang nakita na rin natin dito na you guys both used mythology, Philippine mythology in your
Yeah.
sci-fi stories. And um like back then, I used to think that uh pwede nga namang pagsamahin yung fantasy and sci-fi. But then like towards like few years later, we kind of thought about, no, we cannot really marry them both because iba yung fantasy sa sci-fi, but it's really really easy to incorporate both of them nowadays, especially basta like, with how Kat did in your books, same with Romel. I think I'll also jump into music a little bit later because we also have Rain Rillera, who's implementing music in her works as well. But let's talk about putting in um, the mythological features into your books. Would you say na yung books nyo is more sci-fi, and then yung subgenre lang niya is yung mythology feature nito? Like, what do you think, Kat?
So when it was so interesting because I'm also gonna bring this up in my talk, oh, 'di ba? So sobrang
Ayun.
tuhog yung podcast sa event.
Mm.
I always say that it's never, well, I'm going, before I used to believe that din na, 'di ba, even in the way that people categorize books, it's fantasy and science fiction, 'di ba? Even sa mga bookstores, fantasy and science fiction. And of course, there's the big umbrella genre na parang speculative fiction, but over the years, like as I kept on consuming more books, I realized that it's a spectrum, right? It's never really a hard left or a hard right. It's always, it can swing anywhere in between. So to put it in this sort of dichotomy isn't the right thing to do, because like there's all, it's always 0 to 100 and everything in between. But in terms of tablay, I feel like it is more of like a 60-40. Yung parang it's more science fiction. It just happens to have cues of mythological creatures because at its essence, they are machines. It's just that the design, the visual identity of those machines are based off mythological creatures. Because if it was fantasy, then it would be more of trece, right? Or the the main narrative would revolve around the sort of mystics, 'di ba? That the mythological creatures hold. Pero in this case, it's more of a war story. It's a war story that is enwrapped or enmeshed in parang visualizations of mythological creatures. So mga 60-40, or if I were a bit braver, baka 70-30 yung yung split niya. So that's what I would say tablay is.
Romel, I would say,
Yeah.
I feel you have 50-50, right? Or correct
Well,
me if I'm wrong.
yeah, but with the if you really dig into a lot of the current physical sciences now, especially with quantum mechanics, there's a lot of things there that was fantasy 50 years ago, right? For example, the concept of the multiverse, which is the basis actually of Just Ease, that was something that was not, that was not dreamt of in reality 50 years ago, right? It's something that came up in the late, I would say, 80s in quantum mechanics as a, sorry, I'm nerding out, but it's an explanation for some of the for some of the properties of quantum particles, right? Having a multiverse. So if you have a multiverse, then there's a lot of possibilities right there. For example, in Justice, very basic premise is that our multiverse is around 1,000 years behind from the between the timeline of the two warring universes. So from there, there are a lot of things that you can do, and how we were able to bring in the mythical creatures, that the advancement of those universes, they already have some chemicals that would enable you to change people into these things. So these guys are actually the victims. Sorry, spoiler. But yeah, that's the thing. No, it's the blur between science fiction, which is based on science, and mythologies is becoming really very very thin. For example, there's another thing on quantum mechanics, which is what do you call this? entanglement, for example, which is two particles having the same property or dictating their properties, even though they're light years away. That implies faster than light year communicate light speed communication, for example. So that's something that you can work with. But of course, you have to always remind the reader that those properties are applicable to particles, not to people, right? But when you do that, you're jumping into into science fiction. It's a possibility, right? It's a possibility. It's not real, but it's a possibility.
There. So down to my last question. Representation in sci-fi, in Pinoy sci-fi. Kat, I believe you do have representation when it comes to, well, let's say LGBT, in your books. Why do you think it's so important that there's a representation?
Yeah, I think that in all stories we have, I think that literature has to be a reflection of society. Diba? We always say that life imitates art, art imitates life. And it's just important that in all of our stories, whether that be science fiction or that be non-science fiction, non-fiction, we have to show the world as it is. And it's important that all kinds of people are included in the narrative. And it's important that we have to show that everyone can be just as great as everyone else. For example, in Tablay, there are different opportunities. In Tablay, we actually focus most of the people leading the story are women. We have LGBT representation like Commander
Mm,
Datu. We have the head of technology who's a Muslim engineer, si
mm,
engineer Shalimar Madzar is the chief tech officer of MECO. We have people that really bring life and color to the narrative, because it's important na when someone who's not necessarily like us, diba, they look at the
mm,
story and they say, "Hey, this is possible for me. Hey, this is
mm,
possible that I can dream big." It's been the first time. Actually, it was actually a first step for me na to put, at least to try and put Filipino science fiction on the map. I mean, I wouldn't say
mm,
that I'm there. I mean, we're slowly getting there with baby steps. But the fact na naka-Amazon na tayo, the
mm,
fact na Tablay was able to reach countries like the US, UK, Australia, Israel, Russia. Oh my god, was that so many different countries around the world. Even South
mm,
America actually. The fact na there were people messaging me saying thank you for bringing a Filipino brand of science fiction, because I never imagined that Filipinos could be leads in these kinds of
mm.
stories, right? Because we always see white people, to be honest. We always see white people as the explorers, or of course with time it changes na people are making a more conscious effort na people are making a more conscious effort to show different characters. But the mere fact na Tablay is led by a woman who's a Filipina is I hope is already a great thing, especially
Mm.
as a woman. Oh, Women's Month, guys. Women's As a woman, science fiction by fact. Science fiction by fact is a male dominated industry. I mean, come on,
True.
Cindy, right? Who
That's
how many
true.
see are actually women writers, so in science fiction. So I think that's the importance din of Pinoy sci-fi, and hopefully our own brand of Pinay sci-fi, to show that women are just as capable of writing these technical things as men. Like, I've been thrust into a world na, especially for my day job. My day job, well, just because of the blind, they're like, okay, we're going to make you sell. I sell vehicles, and I
Mm.
sell gas, and I sell motorcycles. And it's been so common in my day-to-day life that people tell me, "Do you even know how to drive a car? Do you even know how to like change oil, or like do you even know how to do this?" And I'm like, "Sige, I'll show you." Ganon. As in, I literally show them. But of course the paradigm changes with time, and I
Mm.
think it, like I said, it's a great initiative na magkakaroon tayo ng Pinoy sci-fi, because you give your voice. So many people now, especially
Mm.
women and LGBT, have a chance to show na magaling din sila when it comes to this. So
Mm.
thank you for making this platform. Yun.
Yeah, yeah. So if you notice here at eight letters, we try to be equal when it comes to representation. Like even in this podcast, we have three women and three men, plus one.
Yes.
Okay. As a publisher. But Romel, last question for you. I would want to talk to you about the stereotypes. Pagdating sa paggawa mo ng mga characters, stereotypes, right? Because I think you've also applied the sort of like stereotypes in your
Yeah.
novel Just the Ease. Um uh what made you saan mo kinukuha yung stereotypes, and how often do you apply that? And nafe-feel mo ba minsan na, oh, teka, sumusobra na to, hindi na to dapat? And so, do you have like those conflicts in your writing ba?
Of course, of course.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the book, if you've there are a couple of stereotypes there, similar to a cat. You know, there's a woman there, or a girl, and there's also an LGBT representation in the superhero team, and there are stereotypes for that, right? And I try to get away from the stereotype, making the girl, for example, who's the most
Mm-hmm.
chismis is her name, because
Oo.
she's the one who has the rumors. Even that is a stereotype, right?
Yes.
Chismosa babae, di ba? So I try to get away from that stereotype, making her the one who explores her powers the most, right? So she's
Mm-hmm.
given a certain power. You can only use that. For example, she's told that you can use it one way, but she continuously find new ways to use it. The other stereotype there is for the LGBT person, for the gay person. The stereotype there is that, you know, he's the one who designed all of
Mm-hmm.
the costumes for the team, but
Mm-hmm.
trying to get away from the stereotype. He's always the strongest, okay,
Mm-hmm.
physically, and he's the one who's actually he's the one who's actually standing up to bullies in school, and actually and he gets into trouble for punching, for example, several people to defend some of the lower class people in the school, for example. So, and then other stereotypes there would be the corrupt politician, the
Mm-hmm.
corrupt politician, a vigilante. There's very popular now. No, there's a corrupt pastor there who's using religion to fool people. So those are the kinds of stereotypes there. But I try to mix them up a bit because um, you try to put in a little bit of reality, because these are also people. The pastor, for example, who exploits people, he can also do good, right?
Mm-hmm.
He can also on the surface do good, but he always has a certain motive, something like that. So yeah. What I did really was I don't have it here, but what I really did was to map out all the characteristics of the characters. I even put in the Myers-Briggs, if you're familiar with that,
Mm-hmm.
the Myers-Briggs
Yeah.
personality of the character, and then what are their, of course, obviously their motivations, but what are their conflicts as well. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'm working now on book two. And for example, there's a lot more conflict, especially for the main characters. For example, one character will lose his trust for his teammates
Mm-hmm.
and things like that. So um, it's really calling, from my experiences in life, in school, and in the working environment. I've been working for several decades now. So it's really taking some things from real life and putting them into the stories. Yun,
Mm-hmm.
ESTJ daw si Doc Vince.
Yeah, if I can add in, I think the
Yeah.
importance of representation isn't tokenism. But sometimes we're just
Mm-hmm.
gonna, okay, let's drop a woman,
Mm-hmm.
LGBT,
Yeah.
BIPOC, ganon. I feel
Uh-huh.
na it has to come from an authentic place, 'di ba? I mean, they need to have purpose in the story. They need to have a reason to, like, 'di ba, be there, and they have
Mm-hmm.
to put breadth and depth to the narrative, and not
Mm-hmm.
just, okay, we decide to make this person just so we don't get canceled. Ganon. That's from that
Yeah.
aspect.
This just shows the love of craft, your expertise writing expertise into practice. You really put it in the book. Now, you don't just, as a chemist, I'll just mix everything up and see how it turns out later on. So I think that's where that's I think that's what makes us, as writers, it's our duty and responsibility to ensure that, okay, this should come up into something. I mean, not just because the reader, not just because of the reviewers that may review later on na, ay, teka, hindi na develop tong character na to ng maayos. And, we don't want those reviews as well. But then also at the same time, every character that we put in the story, it's our responsibility to make them grow. Although sometimes that's also another stereotype na, okay, why does this character need to be developed? What if ganun lang talaga siya? And sometimes
Yeah.
it's the reality. It's the reality that some characters just don't grow. Ayun. Thank you, Romel, and thank you, Kat. Thank you so much for
Thank you so much.
um
Thank you.
gracing the Pinoy Sci-Fi Con podcast, and we'll step into the next world, which would be let me bring in Doc Vince and Rain Rillera. Yeah, there you go. So Rain wrote A Symphony of Suns, and Doc Vince wrote Cabal.
The Dark Sephiroth.
The dark Sephiroth. Yeah, there you go. Thanks so much, Doc Vince. We'll be seeing ayan, Cabal of the Dark Sephiroth. Yeah, that's right. So um for Doc, I would like to ask you on the, like, incorporating uh or actually basically back to world building muna tayo, no. So I want to talk about yung paggawa mo uh ng different languages. Actually, when I read your novel, when I read the novel itself, parang well, basically these are real words themselves, pero you put your twist into it. Like yung
Yes.
Sapiens, pero
Yes.
iba yung
Yeah.
spelling. And
Yes.
you've done that throughout the book consistently, by the way. So can you tell us more about, like, why you've decided to do it like that? Talking about the language that you used in the book.
Okay. First of all, good morning. Thank you for having me. Going straight to the topic. First, I tried to avoid uh, libel. Second, it is an alternate reality.
Mm-hmm.
So some are somehow familiar to the readers, but there's a twist. Okay. So, say for example, uh, meron din siyang kasama na Philippine mythology, but scientized. Meaning, like yung mga cryptids, uh, ano sila, mga genetic experiments by, hindi ko sila tinawag na Nazis, but they
Mm-mm.
are Aninerbe. Okay. These are real world organizations, and I think they're still existing. Okay. So, doon nag-originate yung aking world building because
Mm-mm.
according to the story,
Mm-mm.
different races, they have been in contact with different
Mm-mm.
alien civilizations, okay, at different times of their lives.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm. Okay, I think we're having some
Okay?
technical problems. Yeah, sorry, Doc Vince. Yeah, okay, okay na, okay na.
Okay ba?
Go ahead.
Okay.
Mm-mm.
Ayan. Like, for example, the Philippines, we had our
Oo.
first contact.
Oh, sorry, Doc Vince. Nawawala ka. Hello. Um, try natin to. Ayan, hello? Doc Vince?
Okay na?
Okay na?
Ayan. Let's try
Okay.
again. Let's try
Yeah.
again.
Yes.
Sorry.
So
So world
world
building,
building,
Mm-mm.
different
different
civilizations
civilizations
made
made
different
different
contacts.
contacts. Like the Philippines, late 70s,
Mm-mm.
when we discovered deuterium. Okay, we sought the help of yung sapiens, yung mga humans, pero
Mm-mm.
masyadong disadvantageous yung contract when it comes for Filipinos. And just the
Mm-mm.
same, kumbaga, fortunately for us, may dumating na mga off-world beings. And they gave an offer we cannot refuse. From there, doon nag-start yung adventures ng Philippines when it comes to dealing with aliens.
Mm-mm.
And ang US naman, 1947, when they
Mm-mm.
detonated the atomic bomb.
Mm-mm.
Russia, 1908, during the Tunguska event, a comet exploded over a large part of Russia, which
Mm.
killed many reindeers. Okay, so
Okay.
ayun.
Are we
So
still
based
talking
sa
about
history.
reality, Doc? Or nangyari ba to? Nangyari ba to in the
Opo.
past?
Yeah,
Oh my
that's
God.
that,
Oh,
that's
okay,
why
nangyari.
researchable
Ah,
lahat sa
okay.
internet. Yung mga sinasite ko ng mga events, some of the names were changed.
Mm.
Para, of course, wala tayong problema sa kanilang estate. Baka habulin
Mm.
tayo.
Mm,
Okay?
mm,
Yung sa mga rights and everything. Ayun. So, like say for example, yung aircraft carrier or
mm, mm.
strato carrier.
Mm,
Ang
mm.
pangalan niya is Sarah Palindrome. That is based
Mm,
on Sarah Palin, a
mm,
candidate for the US elections. Kasi yung
mm, mm,
nomenclature ng naming ng mga aircraft carriers is based on the mga names of US presidents. Okay.
mm. Oh,
Pero
wow.
sila hindi
Okay.
siya naging president.
Mm.
Ayun.
Oh, yun. Well, I went to a copyright workshop yesterday, and you're right, Doc Vince. You cannot just pull
Name,
a real person's
brand.
name into your story as well. So yeah, so that's a good solution para magkaroon pa rin ng same effect, right? So that's good, Doc Vince. Rain, can you tell us more about A Symphony of Suns? And magja-jump into lang ako into another topic. So this one would be about solar punk. Is solar punk considered ba as a sci-fi? When I tried researching it, parang although it talks about the social movement that envisions progressions, pwede ba siya sa fantasy or sci-fi lang?
Okay. Kasi yung solar punk, it's like in the tradition of the other punk subgenres sa science fiction. So it's
Mm-mm.
actually rooted in sci-fi. So if you know yung mga more well-known punk subgenres like cyberpunk,
Mm-mm.
yeah, diesel punk, ano ba? Atom punk, mga ganon. So they are all subgenres of sci-fi. And itong solar punk naman is one of the more recent uh, na subgenres. Although parang ano na din, yung idea niya has existed for quite a while and kaya nga yung mga works ni Ursula Le Guin,
Mm.
who was a sci-fi writer back in the 50s, 60s, they can be parang categorized as solar punk, although the term solar punk was not coined until recent years na lang. I'm not sure when. So you may research na lang if anyone's interested in solar punk as a subgenre. So ano naman siya, parang whereas the other punk subgenres, they often depict kind of like parang more dark somehow, like let's take for example mga ano cyberpunk or ano pa ba yung mga kind of punk, diesel punk ganon. So medyo more of yung themes nila is um merong rebellion and maybe like the technology or yung uh, existing socio-economic situation doon sa world na yon um, is not that ideal. So kaya common themes yung mga uprising, mga ganyan,
Mm-mm.
rebellions and stuff. Whereas yung sa solar punk naman is more of utopian. Yan. So yung pagkakaiba
Mm-mm.
niya sa mga ibang dystopian subgenres. So it's more of like a hopeful uh, outlook on the future in which like technology, community, the people come together and live in harmony. And kaya solar punk, solar doesn't necessarily refer, although maybe doesn't necessarily refer to as in sun, solar power per se, but like clean, sustainable energy, parang ganon. So, yon. And then, so I wrote this one. This
Mm-mm.
is a Symphony of Suns. So it's a musical solar punk science fantasy that's about amending the constitutions. If it sounds crazy,
Mm-mm.
it's because I put in I put in like all my favorite things into one book. Hopefully
Mm-mm.
it gels well together. But yun nga, yung kanyang sort of premise here, because so it's like science fantasy because it's like set in a completely different world. It's not on Earth.
Mm-mm.
But um parang meron siyang three suns. So their planet revolves around three suns. And they're starting pa lang, yung civilization is starting to discover like an efficient way of harnessing solar power, which is, diba, it makes sense. They'll use solar
Mm-mm.
power having three suns. So yeah, so the story revolves around that, but since it also has like a very strong musical element to it, or baka pag-uusapan later. But anyway, yun
Mm-mm.
yung basically yung idea about a symphony of suns.
Mm-mm. There. Thank you for sharing, Rain. Well, I can see that you have different elements gelled in together dito sa A Symphony of Sons, which was, by the way, if you guys don't know, this was from the recent Eight Letters Challenge. So, but that was very interesting how you're able to combine all of these elements into one book together. So sometimes when people try to define sci-fi, they would put in, okay, superheroes, check, powers, check, of course, kanina, the mecha, check, and it's very seldom na nami-mention dito yung nature. Well, it's
Yeah.
also a part of of the science fiction world, right? I went into the science museum yesterday, and it would pretty much give you an idea of what else is in the scientific world, basically. Okay, so of course there's technology and all the you environmental, then no, tsunami, what basically can happen, not just outside our world, because sometimes na incorporate yung sci-fi na kailangan may spaceship, kailangan my space na involved, but not necessarily, of course. So, Rain, let's get back naman to Doc Vince world outside Earth, I believe. So, what would be the conflict na nangyari? Ano yung conflict na nangyari sa book mo in Cabal of the Dark Sephiroth? Can we share it to the audience?
Yes, there is this what it is called mga ikugan. Okay, they live in Kappa Orionis. Okay, it's in the Orion constellation. Okay. Meron silang mga assistant na mga alien. This is known as the Mitre. Okay. And the Mitre, sila yung nag contact sa mga Americans in 1947 when they detonated the atomic bomb. Okay, so it means
Mhm.
the aliens saw that humans are ready to join the club. So they had a partnership. Okay, so they trained the Americans in alien technology, enabling the Americans to travel outside of our solar system. And they also instituted a program. I called it the Polar Guardian. So the poles, the north and south,
Mhm.
nag-establish sila ng bases to prevent other aliens from entering the solar system. They want exclusivity. Okay, but the aliens, they use warp gates, and these are hidden in mountains all over the planet. So instead of interstellar travel or intergalactic, they use these
Mhm.
shortcuts. Okay,
Mhm.
this is called Einstein Rosen bridges, also known as wormholes or warp gates. Okay, so
Mhm.
dyan sila dumadaan. Uh, they can
Oo.
bypass yung Polar Guardian. Actually, meron
Mhm.
talagang program. It's called Solar
Meron talaga.
Warden.
Oh.
Researchable.
Nasa Wikipedia pa yan. Okay. O
Ayan.
sige,
So, andun yung
we'll check it
conflict.
out, Doc Vince, for sure. Um,
Okay.
Doc Vince, I also noticed one thing about your novel, by the way, and this is very seldom then, sorry, rarely happens in a sci-fi novel. So, and when I read this part, I felt weird and strange about it. Na parang, okay, why is it bakit nandito siya? So, okay, let me elaborate further. So,
Yeah.
I was talking about yung, well, basically, there's the sexual part.
Interspecies. Yes.
Oo.
Yes.
Was that between human and
Aliens.
an alien?
Human. Yes.
Human and alien. So,
Yes.
paano mo
Conceptualize.
na-engineer? Paano mo na-engineer yung part na yun?
Yes. Kasi I was
Kung
also
may bata mang
thinking,
nanonood, please turn it off.
mature audiences only. Ah. Um, Typically, ang mech stories, you have the pilot and you have the
Mm.
suit. It's either a giant suit or a man-sized suit like
Mm-mm.
Iron Man. I was thinking of something unique. Um, I don't know if you've seen Darling in the Franxx. It's an
No.
anime,
Mm.
but I did not base it there. But it is
Oo.
somehow similar.
Oo.
Yung mech pilot doon, babae lalaki.
Oo.
Here, you wear your organic mecha through coupling.
Mm.
And yung energies generated by the coupling is what powers the mecha. This is
Right.
actually based sa tantric, yung
Mm.
techniques of the Indians,
Mhm.
sexual Taoism by the Chinese,
Mhm.
and even Napoleon Hill. He advocated using sexual energy to create something that is not sexual.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, yun yung naging uh, genesis nung
Mhm.
idea how the Harlequin pilots, the Filipinos, were able to use mecha. It's
Mhm.
organic. They wear it. it these are their mates. It has to be
Mhm.
man and a woman. And typically, female yung alien and
Mhm.
male sapien yung pilot.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay, thank you, Doc Vince. So, hindi lang siya basta, it's not just sci-fi porn.
Yeah.
In the book,
Mature.
but basically it played a part in
Yes.
the progression of the story.
The story.
So
Yes.
yeah, thank you for that, Doc Vince.
Welcome.
Rain, since you will not be at the event sa Pinoy Sci-Fi Con, unfortunately, let's talk about music, which is kanina we did talk about it with Rommel. What he does was he would use music in promoting Pinoy sci-fi. So may mga QR codes sa book. But I know you've always been a music person, Rain. You know, you played in a band, and I want to know kung did it inspire the story na, oh, kailangan may music element itong A Symphony of Sons. Do you feel it's so important na you're able to express yourself in the story?
Ah, yes. So actually, parang central theme yung music dun sa story sa Symphony of Sons. So the way it goes is like a god, but not really a god, like a member of an advanced alien species created a world. Tapos parang siya yung god of music. And so yung sa world na yon, music is like the end all and be all of existence. So that's why parang yung goal nila doon is virtuosity. Yeah, and the world functions on meritocracy, which is a political system in which yung positions of power are assigned according to one's level or skills and abilities. So yung pinakamagaling na musician, siya yung parang doon, sovereign and something like that. So it is yeah, I suppose more than the solar punk part of it, music is
Mm-mm.
the central theme. And syempre, that's by design kasi nga I do
Mm-mm.
love music and grew up around music. And for a time, yun nga, yung nagbabanda ako, it's like a musical world. So I imagined, what if the world really was musical, diba? How would the society look like kung yun ang parang goal ng lahat is to be the best musician. And of course, although it's solar punk, not everything is, a-okay in the world.
Mm-mm.
So it's not only the technological or nature part of it, but it explores kung paano nga yung development ng society nila as they discover solar power. And
Mm-mm.
may mga it's a very highly stratified society because they are ranked nga according to their abilities. So yon, but
Mm-mm.
music does play a huge role. And I wrote a couple of songs na may lyrics for this, but the rest of the music is instrumental. Pero unlike kay Rommel, I don't have like the QR code. They're just gonna have to imagine the music. So yun yung challenge for me as a writer, na how am I going to describe a piece of music
Mm-mm.
without lyrics, without the person actually
Mm-mm.
hearing it. So I wanted to push myself to see kung what are ways in order to describe music in words. So yeah, so I used several different techniques in doing that. And yung aking approach to music in this book was highly inspired by the music we have here in the Cordillera. So even though it's like a completely different world, and parang wala siyang connect to earth, to humans and stuff. But yung mga inspiration ko for the music, they're heavily based on Cordilleran traditions, musical traditions, and that's also a way of um, promoting uh, mga music, maybe not so well known, like mga indigenous music and stuff like that, through sci-fi, through writing. And ayun. And actually, ano din music actually is a kind of science din siya. But maybe we'll get into that next time or some other time. I wish I could come sa Pinoy Sci-Fi Con, but unfortunately, there are some things, there's somewhere I have to be. But yun nga, I'm so excited for it. And seeing all this attention and hype around Pinoy sci-fi. So
Yes, I would say we're taking baby steps. We're not there yet, pero baby steps, and hopefully this will grow into a proper convention na marami ng attendees and participation from different parties involved sa sci-fi. Thank you, Rain. Thank you, Doc Vince. And guys, if you haven't registered for the Pinoy Sci-Fi Con, please do. So we'll be posting the links later on. Very limited seats na lang, and it's if you're into sci-fi, we recommend that you register. Yun nga kasi limited yung space, and we'll be featuring sci-fi books, sci-fi writers, and we'll be launching then yung mga anthologies natin. Rain, you did mention that you want to promote something as well because you'll not be there. Ayun.
Thank you. I almost
Mm,
forgot. Thank you for
mm-mm,
reminding me. Ayan, nakalimutan ko pa tuloy. But yes, so I wanted to promote um, Pinoy Speculative Fiction Group. It's a group on Facebook. Nakakagawa din lang niya nung January. So it's relatively new. And this is a group for local genre writers. So when we say genre, that includes sci-fi, fantasy, horror, and all the other kinds of work na may speculative element. So we invite all writers of genre to join that group. So parang ang long-term goal really is to have like this system to support mga local sci-fi fantasy writers by having parang a pool of, let's say, editors, beta readers, arc reviewers, 'di ba? Para mas mapalakas natin ang spec fic and sci-fi dito sa Pilipinas. So I'm really a strong believer in like organizing ourselves, collective action in order to,
mm-mm.
'di ba? So in order to strengthen ang ating spec fic community here in the Philippines. So ayun, please join us. We're just getting started, but we hope to be able to achieve the goal of providing support
Mm-mm.
for uh, all writers ng spec fic dito sa Philippines.
Thank you, Rain. You're doing an amazing job. Kahit hindi ka makapunta sa Pinoy Sci-Fi Con, you're doing all of this virtually and, in Cordillera and in your own way, basically. Thank you, Rain. Guys, please support once again Pinoy Sci-Fi Con. Please come sa Fully Book High Street this coming Saturday, please, at 3 p.m. 3 to 6. Okay, please come in early. Ayun, there's Tablay. Okay, and I want to promote these books as well. Yes, yeah. Buy the books, buy the books. Thank you so much for watching and for spending time with us this Sunday morning. Bye, everyone. Thank you, Rain. Thank you, Doc Vince. Nawala na si
Bye-bye!
Doc Vince. Bye. Thank you.